I would like to welcome Jason J. His sobriety date is November 30th, 2007. Home group Sandy's Kitchen. Jason, take it away. I'll see you on the other side.
All right, thank you. My name is Jason Johnson. I'm alcoholic. I'm on somebody else's computer, so this is just odd. Sobriety is 11/30/07. I have a sponsor named Carl Morris out of Covina, California, and I have a home group. It's now the Shed. They moved it to a Shed, so we named it the Shed instead of Sandy's Kitchen. It's on Thursdays in Portland, Oregon. If you're ever in the United States or in the state of Oregon and you need a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, please get a hold of me. Any way you can, you know what I mean? You can call the Portland area intergroup office if you want. Christy, thank you for the invite. She doesn't know who I am. I don't know anybody on here. I'm still trying to figure out how I ended up here. I'm in LA. I'm speaking at something tonight. And so I'm in somebody's moving and I'm in their bedroom. A member of Alcoholics Anonymous is moving. And so I came to kind of say goodbye and here I am. So welcome to everybody's new year one. Welcome needed Alcoholics Anonymous, especially the guy that just started today. The only thing I know about Alcoholics Anonymous, beyond a shadow of a doubt, is the program of Alcoholics Anonymous works and God is real. And when I got here, I didn't believe any of that. You know, if you're new, you're wanted, welcome, and needed here. If you got some time and you're hurting, man, the best thing I can tell you, stuff happens, life happens, and we're not always dealt a winning hand in Alcoholics Anonymous, right? But because of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, I know I don't have to fold, right? And that's the biggest gift you guys have given me, is that I have the ability to do life on life's terms. And I'm grateful for that. You know, let's just get this going and get it out of the way. You know, my mom and dad got divorced when I was really young. My dad took off. My mom was an old hippie, right? The reason I know she was a hippie, she smelled like a hippie. You know, she had that patchouli oil smell or whatever. And we lived up in the woods with a bunch of other hippies. And the reason I know they were hippies, they smelled like patchouli oil too. You know, my mom back then, we lived in a teepee once. We lived in a log cabin. We lived in a school bus before it was popular, you know. And what I found out later on is my mom grew pot for a living, right? And that's what my mom did for a living. And so we lived up in the woods and then we come to town and we live up in the woods and we come to town. But when I started going to school, my mom moved to town and her house was a party house, right? It was one of those houses where there might be 10 to 20 people in that house at 2 o'clock in the morning. At 2 o'clock in the morning, I might be the only person in that house, right? And as a little kid, I didn't know there was anything wrong with that, right? I didn't know there was a Leave It to Beaver. I didn't know stuff. I just didn't know, right? I just didn't understand. But what I did know is at night when it got dark outside, if nobody was in that house, I learned how to survive, right? I learned how to pull all the blinds down on the house, turn every light in the house on, and turn the TV up really loud. So if somebody came to break in, they would think there was a party going on and they'd go someplace else, right? And I learned how to make macaroni and cheese on the stove. I learned how to make popcorn on the stove. I learned how to, you know, to draw my own bath. All these things I learned how to do, but I didn't have nothing to judge it against, right? So I didn't know there was anything wrong with that. I just thought that was normal. But, you know, as a little kid, it didn't make me an alcoholic. It just gave me some skills in life, right? It gave me some stuff that I learned to take into my life. Today are some of my character defects that I work on. But back then, they helped me to survive, you know, and it would go on like that for quite a while. But my life changed when I was getting ready to go into the first grade. It was a Sunday before school started, and I was at home by myself. I had all the blinds pulled down, had all the lights in the house turned on, and I'm watching this show called Happy Days. And the phone starts ringing, and it's not like today where the phone goes to voicemail or goes to a message machine or anything like that, or says caller D. It would ring until that person gave up or you picked it up, right? And the phone rang all the way to commercial, right? And so I answered the phone and it was my grandma. And I don't know if there's any grandmas on here, but sometimes grandmas are too invested in their grandkids' lives. Like she wanted to know, am I excited to go to school? Have I taken a bath? Do I have my clothes laid out? Do I have my shoes laid out? Have I eaten dinner? Stuff that has absolutely nothing to do with Happy Days, right? So I'm just saying yes, 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 yes. And finally, I seen my show come back on. I said, hey, Grandma, I got to go. And I said, my show's back on. She says, sweetie, let me talk to your mom. I said, oh, my mom's not here. She's down at the tavern. The phone number is 282-4440. If you call there, this gentleman, Floyd's going to answer the phone. Ask for Darla. She'll come to the phone and tell you she's having one more pitcher of beer and she'll be home. Right. And there was like a long pause. Right. And the next thing I know, my grandma says, give me that number again. I said, okay. And I gave it to her. And what she said to me, she said, sweetie, when your show's over, I want you to go to bed. And when you get up to go to school tomorrow, I want you to listen to what the teacher says and be nice to the other kids. Basically, that's what my sponsor tells me to do today, right? You know what I mean? He just tells me, be nice to others and generous with my time. And I said, okay. And I hung up that phone. And now I'm watching this show called Laverne and Shirley, right? And all of a sudden there's a knock at the door, man. And I kind of panic. And all of a sudden they start trying to shuffle on the windows and banging on the windows. So I crawled underneath this end table and I started to hide. I was just hiding, right? And all of a sudden I hear this Jason open the door. It's Grandma. Man, and as soon as I heard that, man, I got relief, right? I got relief. And I went to that door and I opened up that door. My grandma was standing there and she didn't really look like my grandma. She looked like somebody that had been crying. She looked at somebody that looked mad. She just didn't have that grandma vibe going on. But she said the miracle to me, man. She said, sweetie, get your stuff. You're coming to live at my house. Man, that's like hitting the lottery, right? Because when you go to grandma's house, there's Rice Krispie treats, there's homemade cookies, there's popsicles in the freezer, there's sheets on the bed. The sheets match the pillowcases. But most importantly, there's someone there all the time. That's an easy sell for a little kid, man. So I said, right on. I grab my little bit of stuff. I jump in her car. We drive to her house. I run up these stairs and I'm running to the front room, headed to the kitchen because that's where all the goodies are. And I hear this, hey, and I turn around. It's my grandpa. He's like, what are you doing here? I was like, man, I live here now, right? I didn't know my grandma didn't run it by him, right? She just went and got me. But he looked right at me and he said, yeah, you do, buddy. Come here. And he gave me a hug and I fell asleep on that man's lap every night for the next 4 or 5 years because he made me feel safe, right? He just made it okay. And look, I wasn't an easy kid, right? I'm in AA for Christ's sakes. I'm the kind of guy that, my grandma dropped me off at Sunday school on Sunday morning. She'd push me in the Sunday school class and say, he has an enthusiasm for life. And she would take off down the hall, right? My grandpa would drop me off in the same Sunday school class and say, hey, don't let his cuteness get in the way of your common sense. He's either going to be in trouble or talking his way out of trouble. That's all you need to know about that kid. Good luck. And he would take off, right? And as a little kid, I thought that was kind of bizarre. But if I think about it, I had my first police contact when I was 8 years old, right? I remember I always wanted to be a bank robber. But there was no banks on my block to rob, right? When you're 8, so I got a bandana and a cowboy hat and a BB gun. I rode up to the corner Kool-Aid stand and I robbed it, right? And I robbed my first Kool-Aid stand, my only Kool-Aid stand, if I'm gonna be honest. But I robbed this Kool-Aid stand and it didn't go really well because all they had was Kool-Aid. They didn't really have any money. But I watched TV and I know if you take somebody hostage and hold them for ransom, they could the other kids could go get their piggy banks and we'll all meet in my backyard and I'll give you your friend back, right? So I take this kid and I tie him up to my clothesline pole. But what they don't show you on TV is what to do when your grandma yells dinner, right? Because my grandma yelled dinner at 5:30. If you don't go eat at 5:30, you don't eat. Well, I'm kind of in a dilemma here. I'm in the middle of a robbery, but I got to eat, right? So I told this kid, hey, I'll be back in about 20 minutes. And I put my bandana down and my cowboy hat, my BB gun, and I go inside to eat. And as I'm eating dinner, things are going fine until this police officer knocked on the door. And when the police officer knocked on the door, man, it's not like today where everybody has video cameras. Back then, if a police officer came to the neighborhood, all the neighbors came. So there's one police officer and my whole neighborhood is in my backyard. And this kid's crying like a little weenie because he can't get the knots untied and he's making me look bad. And it's just going really bad, right? And my grandpa starts laughing like really loud, right? And that just made my grandma mad. And she's like, what's so funny? And he goes, man, you can't make this up. So then everybody laughs. And my grandma said, that's it. You're grounded to the house for 30 days. I was like, 30 days grounded? What the heck? But here's the deal. I started to walk to the house crying. My grandpa said, hold on a second. And he went in and he went over and talked to my grandma behind the house. And he came back and said, look, buddy, I didn't tie that young man up to the clothesline pole. There's no need to punish me by grounding you to the inside of the house. You're grounded to the block, right? And right away, that guy became my hero, right? He taught me when I got in trouble to share in a general way. He taught me a lot of things, but here's the problem. As I got older, I don't think he liked me, and I think he hated me because he was always turning me into the police. He was always telling the judge how much money I made. He wasn't a very good crime partner, right? He became a nuisance. What I know today is he was just a good human being, right? He's the kind of guy that if you dropped a quarter on the ground, he'd spend $1 to get it back to you. And as I got older, we grew apart, right? We just grew apart because we're two different people. My grandma, on the other hand, I don't know if there is grandmas on here, but my grandma just won't give up on me, right? My grandma's that person that loved me no matter what. And as a little kid, I didn't believe that at first, but I remember being in the 6th grade and school just started and it was a middle school and I had to start taking a school bus and I got kicked off the school bus. Imagine that. And I'm getting ready to walk my first day home and I'm kind of upset and I see my grandma pull up and I think, man, she's here to pick me up. She said, sweetie, we need to go in and talk to some people. And I said, okay. So we went into this room and there's a classroom with a round table. And on one side of it, there was a couple of my teachers, a couple of counselors, the principal and a lady from a special needs school on one side, and 2 chairs. And my grandma and I sat down. And they proceeded to tell my grandma everything I'd done wrong in the first 3 months of my school, that I had no self-control, that I hit other people, that I didn't know how to read or write at that level. I mean, they made me sound pretty bad, right? And I'm thinking, man, you need to say something. But my grandma just sat there. And when they got done doing all their talking, my grandma said, may I say something? And they said, yes. And I'm like, finally, right? And she said, look, I'm not going to deny Jason did any of those things. He lives at my house, but he's a good kid and there's a good person inside of there. And the reason I know this is every morning on his way to school, he runs down to Mrs. Harrington's house and he throws a newspaper up on the front porch so she doesn't have to come down the stairs. And Shane, the young man who's simple-minded, every time I see him at church on Sunday or the grocery store, the first thing he asks is, where's Jason? Because nobody picks on Jason when he's around. When they play sports, Jason always picks him first to be on his team. Nobody told Jason to do those things. He did them on his own. So I know there's a good kid inside of there. We need to tap into that. I ended up having my best year at school that year, but most importantly, I remember walking out of that classroom and walking down that hall and looking up at my grandma and believing somebody loved me, right? I had never felt that before. I'd never felt where I felt like somebody truly loved me. And man, my grandma became my best friend. Man, wherever she went, I went, you know. But the damnedest thing happened, you know, that kid I tied up to the clothesline pole, Sean, he ended up being one of my best friends. So some people think I need Alan on because I took a hostage right off the bat, right? And Sean and I were going to go sleep in Leif's backyard on a Friday night. And we're in the backyard setting up the night to go. And Leif's mom comes out and says, "Hey, we're all the adults are going bowling, and we ordered you guys a pizza. There's $10 on the counter. Pay the pizza guy when he gets here and stay in the house." And we're like, "That's a pretty good deal, right?" And so they go to leave. The pizza comes. We pay the pizza guy, and right before we go to drink the pizza, eat the pizza, my buddy Leif says, "Hey, pizza tastes better with beer." I'd never drank beer before, but I said, "Yes, it does." And he went downstairs and he got this case of Lucky Lager beer and he brought it back up. I'm here to tell you, it sucked. Man, it was nasty. When I took my first drink of alcohol, it didn't go, oh, I didn't feel it. And I had to plug my nose and hang in there, right? And I just hung in there as quite as possibly as I could, right? But here's what happened. The next couple of hours, man, I was having a blast, right? And then about an hour after that, man, I got food poisoning and I'm sicker than a dog, right? And I don't know about you, but when I get sick, I have to go home and get taken care of. And I go home and I'm sick all night and nobody's taking care of me. And the next morning I wake up and there's my grandpa. He's at the end of my bed yelling, "Get up, you got to go to work." I tried to explain to him I don't have a job. He said, "Get up, you got to go to work." I said, "I don't feel good." And he said to me, "If you're going to drink like a big boy, you're going to work like a big boy. Now let's go." And so I got up and I thought for sure my grandma would save me, but she didn't. She handed me a warm egg salad sandwich and a thermos of warm milk and told me, "Have a great day." And he took me over and we picked up Leif and Sean and they took us to pick strawberries. It's against the law for a minor to pick up strawberries in the state of Oregon if you're under 12 years old, and nobody's ever thanked me for that. But I at least have one claim to fame. But I just didn't want to drink no more, right? I remember looking at my buddies and telling them I'm not drinking alcohol anymore. And they said, "You're not drinking anymore?" I said, "I don't mind the alcohol. I just don't want to work." Right. So I quit cold turkey. No AA, no 12 steps, no treatment or anything like that, man. I just quit drinking. But here's what happened. Because of the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous and doing a thorough step one, I realized today that my obsession and my allergy kicked in when I got to high school. For me, what I did is I played sports during the week and I drank on the weekends. You know what I mean? And what I do is I'd save my lunch money Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and I pitch it together, shoulder tap with somebody, and we drink on the weekends. Nobody was going to jail. Nobody was dying of a heroin overdose. We were just having a good time. And I would do that over and over and over and over, not knowing that alcohol was taking a hold of me. But on May 5th, 1989, I stole a motorcycle and I got in a high-speed chase and I crashed. I ended up in an ICU in a hospital, not knowing what happened. And I remember waking up in this hospital bed and trying to figure out, you know, when you're coming out of a blackout, trying to figure out what happened. And I started talking to this nurse and I asked her what happened. She said, "You're in a drunk driving accident on a motorcycle." I said, "Well, I don't own a motorcycle." She said, "We know. And the police have been here a couple of times." And I was like, "Man, am I going to die?" And she said, "You're not going to die, but you're probably going to lose your left leg. And if you don't lose your left leg, you'll probably never walk normal again." And I remember thinking to myself, I'm never going to drink or use anymore. I'm done. Right. But what happened, man, is when I got out of the hospital, I had so much anxiety and I had so much fear and I was so scared. The only thing that'd make it okay was alcohol. Right. I had to put something in my body to be okay with me. And eventually I would just lower my standards to keep up with my quality of life. And eventually I'd be living in an abandoned house, right, with a bunch of other people doing what you have to do to stay alive. Right. And I was good with that. Alcohol made that okay. But what happened was, man, about once a month, one of my uncles would show up where I was at and drag me down to a payphone and say, "You have to call grandma." And I was like, "Man, why do I got to call grandma?" And they said, "Because she calls every hospital, every institution, every jail. And then she calls all of us and calls all of your friends. Has anybody seen Jason? Anybody know where Jason is? Is Jason alive? So you need to call her and tell her you're alive and you're doing okay. So she'll leave us alone." And so I get on the phone and I call my grandma and I tell her what I tell her, man. I tell her I have a great job and I'm working out of town, you know, and I'd come see her. Then when I got into town, or I would tell her I'd come see her the next day or something like that. Dude, and I meant that. I love that lady with my whole heart and I meant that. But when I put alcohol in my body, I can justify and rationalize why I don't show up. Right. And I would do that over and over. And I was just killing that lady. And every once in a while I'd go to her house and I'd visit with her. And what she would do is when she would go into the bathroom, she'd leave $5 sticking out of her purse or $5 on the counter on the kitchen or $5 on the coffee table, knowing I would steal it. Right. And I would do that over and over and over. What I know today, I was killing that lady. Right. And I just drove her. I just did what I had to do. When you're an alcoholic like I am, it doesn't matter who's the victim, right? You just do what you got to do. And this would go on for quite a while. On December 29th or December 5th, 1997, my uncle Leroy showed up at my tent. I had got kicked out of an abandoned house and I was living in the backyard in a tent before that was popular. And He came to tell me that my grandma had been in ICU for a couple weeks and that they took her off of life support and I should probably come say goodbye. I told him I don't want to say goodbye. I just want to be left alone. He said, "You're going to go." And he's a big biker guy, so I kind of had no choice. I got in his truck, and when we got in the truck, he handed me a pint of vodka and he said, "Just chug it, buddy." And I chugged this vodka, and by the time we got to this hospital, I'm okay being a piece of crap that's not going to amount to nothing. I'm okay being that guy. Look, I'm the kind of guy, even at the end of my run, if I was at a drug house or a family outing or if anything on in a TV commercial came up about treatment, everybody would stop what they were doing and look at me, right? I'm the guy. I'm the guy that steals stuff. I'm the guy that does everything wrong when I put alcohol in my body. So when I got off that elevator, I knew nobody was going to talk to me. So I went and sat on one side of the room and all my family's on the other side. You know, my mom didn't even come over and talk to me. And finally, my aunt came over and said, "You need to get in there, say goodbye, and get out of here." And I said, "Okay." And I went into this room and my Uncle Gary was sitting there. He said, "Man, just talk to her like she's there. She hasn't been awake all day, but she can hear what you're saying. Just talk to her and just take as long as you want. Don't worry about anybody else." And I said, "Okay." So I grabbed my grandma's hand and I started talking to her. Eventually she opened her eyes and then she started talking back to me, man. And I panicked because everybody started running to the door wanting to see her. And I didn't know what to do, right? I don't know what I'm past what I know what to do. And I just told her, "Grandma, I'm doing really good. I'm working out of town, but there's a lot of people here that would like to see you. I'll come back tomorrow and visit." And she told me she loved me and she was going to pray for me and she was proud of me. And I just remember thinking, man, she needs to give up on me. And I said, so I started to walk out of there and she told my Uncle Gary, "He's a good kid. You watch, he's going to do something with his life." Right. And it just nutted me up, man. I went back to my tent and I drink how you drink and I do what I have to do to kill those voices and kill that feeling. Right. About 2 days later, my Uncle Dale showed up to let me know that my grandma had passed. The memorial was in a couple of days and his family would come pick me up and take me to the memorial. And I said, "Okay." And the day of that memorial came and I hid in a closet with a bottle of Goldschlager and some Jägermeister and I didn't come out, right? Because look, when I put alcohol in my body, I can justify and rationalize why I don't come out. And I didn't come out because I was too embarrassed, too ashamed, and too scared to face that demon, right? And I didn't go to the funeral. And, you know, I could hear him saying it's going to haunt you for the rest of your life. And I just didn't believe him, but it did, right? And I would go on like that for the next 2 weeks, man. I just drank. I just drank and I just drank and I just drank. And finally, it got to the point where nobody was talking to me. I hadn't anything in my body for about a week. So I'm detoxing. I'm not doing really well. And I'm just a mess. And it's a Sunday morning. I make this vital mistake. I call my Uncle Gary to see if he was going to church. He said yes. And my Gary's about 7 years older than me. We're like brothers. We grew up in the same house. I knew he was going to beat me up for not coming to the memorial, but I didn't think he'd beat me up in church, right? So we get to this church and we're sitting there and all his family's at one end of the pew and I'm at the end of the pew. Well, the whole church is at one end of the pew and then I'm at the other end of the pew because I haven't drank or showered or done anything for a week. And so I'm not looking too good or smelling too good. And they start singing this song, "How Great Thou Art." And then they started singing that song, "Amazing Grace," man. And I just got caught up in the moment, right? I don't know what happened. And I looked at my uncle, I said, "Man, I think I have a drinking problem." He's like, "You think?" And I said, "Well, I might have a drug problem too, if it makes anything better to you, right?" But the whole church went quiet, right? And he said, "Well, this is what we're going to do, buddy." He said, "You're going to come over to my house. We're going to feed you. We're going to wash your clothes. You're going to take a shower and I'll give you 20 bucks and figure out what to do with your life." And I'm good with that. And I said, "Great." We get to his house. I go to take a shower. When I come out of the shower, he said, "Look up treatment centers. You're going to go to treatment." I go, "What's that?" He goes, "Look up hospitals. This is no time for negotiations." I didn't know what treatment centers were, but I didn't think anything would be open on a Sunday. So I opened up hospital. The first hospital was Adventist. I called it. They answered. This lady, I told this lady, "I think I have a drinking problem." Man, she got all excited, right? Passed me over to this other lady. I told her I might have a drug problem too. She was even more excited than the first lady. And she said, "Can you be here tomorrow morning at 8 a.m.? We can do an assessment. We could probably get you into detox." I'm like, "Yeah, whatever," right? So I get off the phone. I tell my uncle I have an appointment at a detox thing tomorrow at 8 a.m. Give me 20 bucks. I'll tell you how it went. He said, "No, I had to stay at his house." Right. And he would take me. And man, it just got bad. Right. It was a miserable night. It's one of those nights where it just sucked. Next morning we wake up and he tells me to take a shower. I take a shower again. He goes to taking the shower and I remember he had a liquor cabinet. Once he went into that shower, man, I went to that liquor cabinet and I got some Bacardi 151 and I put it in a Coke can. And by the time he got out of the shower, I'm ready to go to this detox treatment thing. I don't know what it is, but I'm all in, right? I have nothing else to do in life. We get in his trunk. I'm drinking my pop can and he says, "Man, I smell alcohol." I said, "It's not me. I'm going to detox." And he just started looking at me like weird. Today, I know that's what everybody says. I just chugged that can as fast as I could. And I made another vital mistake. We got to this treatment detox center. I went into this detox center. I went to hide my pop can in the bathroom underneath the bag so nobody would find it to know I had alcohol in it. And my uncle went in and he answered yes to something. I don't know. And next thing I know, I'm in this detox center. And I don't know about your detox centers in your area, but this one I went to was the worst detox center possibly in the state of Oregon at the time. Right. And the reason it had no caffeine, it had no sugar, and it had no women. dude, I'm 29, 26 years old, and those are big deals. I mean, I was living in some bushes in a tent, right? But those are big deals for a 26-year-old guy. And I'm like, man, this is a bad idea, right? And I didn't know you could just leave detox. I thought it was like prison, right? So I'm looking at the shift changes. I'm watching the food come in. I'm watching the elevator go up and down because I'm going to break out of this place, man. This is just a huge mistake, right? But there was 4 guys. It was December 29th, 1997. There was 4 guys sitting in this treatment center with me that looked like they needed to be in treatment, right? They looked bad. They looked really bad, right? But they were talking about this thing called ANA. And I said, what's ANA? And they said, well, man, this is the deal. And they started talking about it. But here's the miracle that got me to AA. What they shared with me, they said there's caffeine, there's sugar, and there's women. I'm like, sweet. How do we get, where's it at? They said a van's going to pick us up and take us. I was like, man, this is just a miracle. It's just hitting me left and right here, right? Because I'll get in this van, I'll go to this AA, and I'll escape from this meeting, right? So we get in this van on Tuesday night, and I need to tell you about 3 years before all this went down, I ended up in this detox center. My dad called my mom out of the blue to pay back all the back child support he owed. I went to this bank for maybe 20 minutes, if that, talked to this guy for 5, took my half of the money and went and did what I had to do for the next 3 years to end up in those situations I was at. I may have said hi to this guy. I don't know. I didn't need a dad, so I didn't really talk to him, but I got his money, which I had to pay back because of sponsorship to my mom. But I said, okay, so I see this guy, but now I'm in this van 3 years later going to this thing called ANA. And I prayed to this God that I really don't understand and I really don't believe in, but I said, please, God, don't let me know anybody in AA. And if I do, please don't let me owe him any money, right? And there was nothing about staying sober or anything like that. I just didn't want no drama, right? And we get to this AA meeting, we walk in there and there's caffeine, right? There's coffee on the counter, there's sugar on the table, these candy bars and stuff. And there's some women in there, right? So I'm sitting around looking, seeing who I'm going to marry to bust me out of this prison thing I'm in. And I see this guy standing in the back. And I said, man, that looks like my dad. And my buddies I'm with now, they said, that you don't know who your dad is? I said, I've seen him one time in 26 years. They said, you got to go say something. So I walked up at the break. I said to this guy, I said, do you know who I am? He said, nope. I said, I think you're my dad. And he said, Jason? And I said, yeah. And I met my dad at my very first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and it changed my life, right? It changed my life. He was doing a 9th step when I met him. I was told, I remember when I was a little kid, my grandma used to say, God either says yes, not right now, or I got something better. I used to think it was the dumbest thing in the world, right? But here's what I'm here to tell you. I remember as a little kid sitting on that front porch after school in the 4th or 5th grade, coming home on Fridays and sitting on that front porch, waiting for my mom or my dad to come pick me up to take me somewhere for the weekend, and they wouldn't show, right? I know what it's like to be that kid sitting on that porch, right? And I remember one Friday I sat on that porch and nobody showed, and I went in the house and I went up to my grandma. I told my grandma, I'm not going to your Sunday school thing anymore. She said, why is that? I said, I've been praying to that Jesus guy every morning and every night that my mom or my dad would come pick me up, and they didn't come, and I just don't think he likes me, so there's no need for me to go back there. And she just looked at me and she said, okay. And I went in and I got on my grandpa's lap, and I told my grandpa I never want to sit on that front porch again. He said, buddy, you never have to sit on that front porch again if you don't want to. And I made a decision right there as a little kid. I don't need a mom and a dad, and I don't need a God, right? All I need is my grandparents, and I'm good. 20-some years later, I'm sitting on that front porch on a Friday night, just got out of detox treatment thing, and I'm waiting for members of Alcoholics Anonymous to come pick me up to take me to an AA meeting. And it's not like today where they text you or they call you. Back then, there was none of that. So they start honking like 3 blocks away, right? Because they want everybody to know we're picking Jason up and taking him to AA. No anonymity there, right? But here's the deal. That car pulls up and I run down there, and you know who's there to pick me up? It's my dad, right? So God either says yes, not right now, or I got something better. I just have to trust the process. And what happened, man, is he took me to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I met this girl. I kissed her. She got pregnant. Then she got divorced, and then we got married, right? If you're new on here, that's not how you do anything, right? But that's how Jason does it, right? And I started doing Alcoholics Anonymous. My problem was I was only doing 1 meeting a month, right? I was going to 1 meeting a month. It was a big speakers meeting. I was a raffle chair, and I was stealing half the money. I had to pay it back because of sponsorship, right? But I didn't want to go this one Saturday of the month, and I wanted to take it off. So I got in a fight with my wife because she was on the committee also. And I asked her for a divorce, and she said, no, I didn't know you could do that. I thought you had to get attorneys. She goes, I'm going to the meeting. And so she left, and I did what every good alcoholic I thought would do at that moment in time. With all the knowledge I have, I went into my daughter's room. I got a big book and a Bible, and I got on the computer and I wrote a resignation letter to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I dated it and I signed it. I was going to take it to this guy. His name's John B. John B, I thought was the president of AA in Oregon, right? Because he had a whole bunch of naughtigans. I don't know what you guys call them, sponsies, pigeons, ducklings, whatever. I call them naughtigans, right? Because like when you show up to the meeting, there's a bunch of them who want to greet you, and you're like, good God, not again. They want to touch you, hug you, ask you how you're doing. Or they get called on in meetings and they talk about God, sponsorship, the allergy of the body, stuff that has absolutely nothing to do with AA when you're new. So I call them all naughtigans, right? Because I was like, good God, not again, not that guy, right? And he had a bunch of them, right? So I thought he was the president of AA. So I walk up in front of 600 people. I hand him my resignation letter, man. He reads it and he starts laughing like really loud. And all these Nottigans are swarming around and they're reading it and they're laughing. And yeah, I'm just sweating, right? And the next thing I know, he goes, no. And I go, what do you mean, no? He goes, I'm not going to allow you to leave Alcoholics Anonymous. And what accidentally came out of my mouth is, will you sponsor me? Man, he quit laughing just like that. He said, are you willing to go to any link for victory over alcohol? I'm thinking to myself, I just resigned from a letter to AA that's going to haunt me for the rest of my life. Yeah, whatever. He said, this is what you're going to do, buddy. You're going to get on your knees every morning. You're going to say, you get on your knees in the morning, you're going to say, please help, thank you, amen. And at night, you're going to get on your knees and you're going to say thanks. God don't need to hear any more from you. You're going to be trying to con him. He said, you're going to go to 5 meetings a week, 2 where I'm at. You're going to read 2 pages out of the big book. You're going to call me every morning at 6:30 and you're going to not drink in between meetings. If you do those things, your life's going to get better in spite of you. Man, and within 30 days, I was a head Nottingham. Man, I was the head greeter at my meeting. I was self-appointed, but I was the head greeter, right? My job in Alcoholics Anonymous, I had to shake every woman's hand that walked through the door, look her in the eye, and make sure she felt safe in our meeting. Every guy that walked in, I had to hug him, tell him I loved him, and I'm doing better every day in every way. Very unnecessary, very uncalled for, very awkward for a guy like me. But I did it, right? And here's what happened. For the next 5 to 6 years, man, I became a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. But at 9 years of sobriety, man, I couldn't stand you people anymore. I knew what Chad was going to say when they called on him. You know, Chris is going to have a birthday the same year, same day every year. Her whole family's going to show up. They're going to say the same damn thing. This person's going to read the steps like this. This person's going to talk about this. Dude, I sat in the back, just pissed off, right? Just judging Alcoholics Anonymous. So I started selling drugs. Right? I don't know if anybody else in here has thought of selling drugs sober, but I got pretty good at it. And 9 years of sobriety, I bought a car. I took it to a place called Les Schwab. They put some wheels and tires on it. I drove away and the wheel fell off and I crashed. And they rented me this thing called the Chrysler 300. It looked like a Rolls Royce. It said Hemi on the side. Man, it looked like I had arrived, right? So I get in this car. I go meet this guy that I've been meeting every day for about a year. And I picked up this, well, small basketball size of methamphetamines. They weighed it out at 157 grams. And I'm driving down the road and all of a sudden all these cop cars swarm this car, right? And I didn't know what to do with it because it's a rental car, right? So it's a rental car. I have proof of insurance and a valid driver's license, and I haven't had a drink or drug in 9 years. And I go to AA. I should probably be able to talk my way out of what's going on here, right? And there's like 20, 30 cop cars. I guess they call it a task force, right? So I take my dope and I put it underneath the front seat, and I was just going to tell them it came with the car. And so finally, this officer walks up and he taps on the window. I rolled down the window because I didn't want them to know that I knew they were all there, right? And he said, Jason, which is another bad sign. He said, could you shut the car off and come step up on the curb? And I said, yeah, I can do that. And so I shut that car off and I opened up that door. And as I opened up that door and I'm getting out, I hear, and I look down and the seat's moving back all by itself. I've never had a car with a memory seat, right? And it went all the way back. And you can't yell do over or time out. And you can't reach down and try to push your dope underneath the seat, right? So now my dope is in the middle of the floor, right? It's not a good hiding spot at all, right? So I thought, well, hell, maybe they won't see it. So I shut the door and I went up on the curb and sure enough, they did. And I ended up getting charged with commercial delivery, commercial possession, racketeering, intimidation of a federal witness, and a gun charge with 9 years of sobriety, going to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, judging the people that are trying to save their lives. Man, and I burned it to the ground, burned it to the ground. I ended up, my wife divorced me, which was a good call on her behalf. She has remarried me. Some people think that's a bad call, especially in AA. They're like, why would you marry that guy again? But, I ended up getting sentenced to 48 months in prison. When I was out there running in between getting sentenced to prison, I signed the rights away to my daughter for $20 and a ride to a drug house, right? Because that's the kind of guy you get. When I put dope in my body or I put anything in my body, man, I just changed my whole perspective on life. And I just burned it to the ground. I got sentenced, like I said, to 48 months in prison. My first 3 weeks were in the hole, and that's the best thing that ever happened to me. Because I remember being locked up in this hole, scared, had a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear, and I didn't know what to do. And I did what you guys told me to do. I could hear John's voice, and I got on my knees and I just said, please help, thank you, amen. And I got back up on that bunk. If I got any kind of relief, I got back down and I said, thanks. I would do that over and over. And eventually on day 3 or 4, I was sitting on that bunk in this cell all by myself, looking at this piece of metal on the wall, and I could see my reflection. And for the first time in my life, I realized I'm a piece of crap, man. I became the guy I despise. How did I get here? How did I throw all that away, man? And right then and there, I made that decision that I'm powerless over alcohol. My life is unmanageable, right? I didn't have to tell anybody else. I just had it in my head and I talked about it in my heart and I told it to God, and my life changed. At 3 months and 27 days of a 48-month sentence, some judges in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous in the state of Oregon signed some paperwork. It got me a suspended sentence to serve my time in the community. I've been an active member of Alcoholics Anonymous in good standing since that day. I do everything I possibly can to stay a member of Alcoholics is a good member of Alcoholics Anonymous, right? You can go in my home group. They're not too impressed about my talking or anything like that. I mean, I tell people all the time, I have friends all over the world, just none at home. My home group's not too impressed with me, but I show up and I do the deal. I have a service commitment and I do AA and I do life. You know, in doing this, man, I destroyed my little daughter's life and I had to build that stuff back. And the men's are what killed me. I mean, that's the thing that, well, it didn't kill me, but that's the thing that brought me together. You know, my daughter's 25 now. She's getting ready to get married to this fire guy. He's a fireman. She works for the court system. She's going to attorney. She's a clerk right now. And it's just amazing to me. It's baffling to me. But I remember about, I don't know, 8 or 9 months ago, my daughter was, a bunch of these sorority girls are at our house and they were trying to talk my daughter into running for president of the United States at this cool mock thing or whatever. And so I heard that. So I walked to the kitchen and I said, hey, can I have a cabinet position? And my daughter said no. She didn't even hesitate. She just said no. I said, well, what can I do at the White House? She said, you could be a greeter, right? And I was like, well, geez, greeter, that's a good job, right? So if my daughter ever really does become president of the United States, I can be a greeter. You guys better get there kind of fast. But the coolest part of that whole situation was one of those girls asked my daughter, isn't your dad's past going to affect your life or be hard on you? And without even hesitating, my daughter looked right at me and said, my dad's past is my greatest asset. That's the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. That was because I became willing to do the deal and I started doing this. Look, I'm not the best dad in the world. My daughter was 17 years old. And I'll tell you the story. My daughter was 17 years old. My wife came to me one day and she said, hey, we're going on vacation. I said, where are we going? She said, Canada. Back then I couldn't go to Canada. I said, I can't go. She goes, I know. And away they went, right? And they went on vacation for 2 weeks and I stayed home and dog sit in my house. Well, I guess you don't dog sit according to my family, but it was me and the dogs and they're gone for 2 weeks and they come back and my daughter goes straight to her room. My wife comes in and says, hey, I need to talk to you. I said, what's up? She goes, no, I need to talk to you. You need not to overreact. So I got up and we went in the kitchen. I said, well, give it to me. What do you got? She goes, well, when we were up in Canada, Bailey got a tattoo. Whew, I wasn't ready for that. Yeah, my daughter's 17 years old. I saw Tramp Stamp. I saw stripper poles. I saw Aerosmith videos. I saw Redman. I went batshit crazy, right? I have a sleeve. I've been locked up, right? But when it's your 17-year-old daughter, somebody's going to prison. We're getting a divorce. And I got to figure out how to get that tattoo off her back, right? And I haven't even seen the tattoo, but these are things I know, right? So I call my wife names and tell her we're getting a divorce and she's going to prison and she's looking at me like I'm batshit crazy. So I go upstairs, man, and I yell at my daughter, man. I just give her everything I got, man. And she just starts crying. And it's not going well. So I go back downstairs, get into it with my wife again. And my wife told me to go for a ride. And I got in my car and what I did is I called an Al-Anon, right? Because that's who you call when you want to get an alcoholic arrested or divorced or get a tattoo removed, I thought, right? So I called this Al-Anon. I love in the door and we're on the speakerphone. And I call her and I explained to her what's going on. And man, I don't know here's the problem with Al-Anon. I mean, there's no problem with it works, but man, if I go to AA and I ask Chad, hey, what's the problem? He's going to give me the answer to the solution or give me the solution before I'm even done explaining the problem. That's how AA works, right? Turn it over, trust God. Did you inventory? Did you pray about it, right? These Al-Anons, man, they must write it down and text it out to other people. It took this lady like 3 miles to respond, right? I don't know what she was doing. I told her the story 6 or 7 times and she's not giving me anything. Finally, she says, you want to know what I just heard? I said, yeah. She said, man, you just told your daughter she's not beautiful and any decisions she makes are not to your standards. It's, you know, and her body's your body. I mean, she made me sound kind of bad too, right? And I was like, man, I didn't mean any of that. She goes, I know you didn't. She goes, you need to go back and make that right. And I could hear her husband on the speakerphone yelling, you better invite God to go with you. So I'm driving down the road like this, right? Because I don't need AA's help. But I get back to my driveway and I sit there for a little bit and I invite God to go with me, right? And I go in that house and I tell my wife I reacted. She said, oh, yeah, you did. And I went upstairs. My daughter, 17 years old, still crying on a bed, right? And I had to tell her, I'm sorry, man. I'm an idiot. I don't care what you do with your body. I don't care who you love. I don't care what your beliefs are. I don't care anything. All you need to know is I love you no matter what. And I will do anything in the world to make sure you feel safe. She goes, I know, Dad. She knows. She goes, we knew you were going to overreact. I said, well, why didn't you text me or something? She goes, you think that would have mattered? I said, probably not, but you could have gave me a heads up. She goes, you want to see the tattoo? Whew, I guess, you know what I mean? And she lifts up her shirt and on the side of her chest, there's an AA symbol and it says 1 day at a time. And there's a hand going like this and a hand going like this. In my inside voice, I didn't say anything else. I thought, Jesus, I hope you're not an alcoholic. And what's with the praying hands? We're not Catholic, right? But she goes, you want to know what the tattoo means? I said, sure. She said, if it wasn't for Alcoholics Anonymous, you and Mom would have never met and I wouldn't be here. I said, oh, that's pretty good. And she said, the hand going like this is Mom's hand because she always makes the coffee and serves the cookies at the meeting. And the hand like this is yours, Dad, because you're always welcoming people to Alcoholics Anonymous and give them a hand up. So now I'm on the edge of the bed crying, right? This lady, Polly Pistol, told me that was God kicking me in the nuts. I wasn't crying. But that's the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's when you can make a difference in somebody else's life, right? And it would go on. I mean, I could tell you story to story that my daughter and I have had that miracle, or my wife and I have had that miracle. But the men's that really affected me the most were the ones with my grandparents, right? Because they're the people that love me no matter what. They're the parents, the people that just took care of me, right? So my grandpa was alive, and I went to my grandpa's house and I said, "Hey, Grandpa, I'm in AA." He goes, "Boy, everybody knows you're in AA, Jason." I said, "Well, yeah, but there's these things called the steps, and I have to make amends. And I borrowed a lot of money, stole a lot of money from you and Grandma, but I don't know how much." He goes, "I do." I go, "You do?" He goes, "Yeah." And he goes into my grandma's bedroom and he comes back with these spiral notebooks. Jesus, my grandma was like the mob, right? From 1974, Jason borrowed 25 cents. Jason mowed the lawn, had 10 cents credit. This lady had every IOU, every contract, every ticket, every insurance. Dude, it was ridiculous, right? To like 1995. I'm like, who does that, right? I mean, I just remember sitting there thinking, I looked at him, I said, "Man, I can't pay all this money back. Who even has that much money?" And he goes, "I know you can't pay it back." I said, "What can I do?" And he said, "Man, you just keep helping people." I said, "That's a great idea." Right. But these books was like the history of your life. But in 1984, it said Jason stole $5. Jason stole $5. Jason stole $5. Jason. So I said, "Hey, Grandpa, how do you know I stole $5 in 1984? He goes, "Oh, that's easy. Every Thursday night, I put $5 in the coffee cup in the hutch. Every Friday morning, it was gone. The only people that live here are the author of the books, me, who put the money in there, and you. Who do you think stole it?" And I thought to myself, this is what I said to him. I said, "If you knew I stole it, why didn't you tell me to stop or do something?" And then this is the guy I thought hated me, was always out to get me, right? He said, "Jason, stealing isn't wrong until it's wrong to you. And I'd rather you steal from me than our neighbors or your friends." And that's the guy I thought hated me, right? And I left that place and I got in my car. I called my sponsor. He said, "How much do you owe?" And I said, "I don't have to pay anything back." So I went back, talked to my grandpa, and I ended up buying my grandpa cable TV till the day he died. But I remember about 2 or 3 weeks after he got cable TV, he called me up, man, and we talked about, he's the only person I know that watched every channel. Even that one with the line that buzzes, I think he gave it 10 minutes, right? He watched every single channel, right? He's going to get his money's worth, right? But we talked about Pawn Stars. We talked about the History Channel. We talked about ESPN being on all the time, the news channels. Man, he's just baffled, right? And at the end of that conversation, man, he said, "This is one of the greatest gifts anybody's ever given me." That's the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's what you guys told me to do to make it right. And I did that and my life changed, right? And when he died, we were good. My grandma, on the other hand, man, she's dead. And I don't know if anybody has anybody in here. It might not be your grandma, it might be somebody that believed in you when nobody else would. The person that wouldn't give up on you, that person that got you to the treatment center, the person that comes to visit you, the person who welcomed you when you came into the rooms. Man, every once in a while, some of those people don't get to see us get sober on this planet, man, and it just eats us up inside. And I was just tore up, man. I didn't know how to make amends to my grandma. And I went to the graveside. I looked for dragonflies, butterflies, tomato bugs, ants, spiders. I did everything you guys told me to look for. I wrote letters. I prayed. I sent flowers. I did everything I could. And I couldn't always get that relief, right? I get a little bit, but I couldn't get it. And I prayed and prayed. And about, I don't know, 7, 8 years ago, I was on a flight home from a conference, and I get this message from this guy. And this guy is the kind of guy that he's just a good AA member, but he knows I don't take clear cut directions really well. So he knows if I can hear it in a story and I can feel it, you got me, right? And it was a story about this little boy who was the firstborn in his family. And his sisters were born, and his dad started paying attention to his sisters, and he got really jealous. But he knew his dad loved football, so he went to his mom and dad and asked him if he could play football, and they signed him up. And right away, he realized this is a bad idea. He's the smallest kid on the team. He doesn't like cold. He doesn't like being touched. But the problem was, is after every single game and every single practice, his dad would come give him a hug, come find him, give him a hug, and tell him he loved him and how proud he was of him. So the little boy just kept playing all through high school. And his senior year of high school, he's going to the state championship. His team is, right? And it's a big deal for his town. And 2 weeks before that big game, he's at practice, and all of a sudden his coach calls him over and says, "Son, I don't know how to tell you this, but your dad had a heart attack today and he didn't make it." And the young man hit his knees, and everybody's gathering around. And he's crying. He gets up and he looks at the coach and he asks the coach, "Is it okay if I go home a little early today?" The coach said, "Man, this is just a football game. Go home and take care of your sister and your mom and whatever you have to do for your dad. Don't worry about this. This is just a football game." And the young man said, "Okay," and he takes off. And the big game came 2 weeks later, and it's the third quarter, and the kid comes running out on the field, and everybody kind of cheers. And he runs up to the coach and asks him if he can play. And his team's losing really bad, so the coach is like, "Whatever, go in." Kid goes in there and he intercepts a football and runs it back for a touchdown. And the coach is like, "Wow." And then this kid makes a bunch of tackles. He ends up winning the state championship for his football team. The worst player in the school history just ended up being the best player for the state championship, right? And that night, as the coach is leaving the locker room, he sees a young man sitting by himself, and he walks over and tells him to take as long as he wants. And the young man says, "Thanks, coach." And the coach says, "I need to ask you something." He goes, "What happened out there tonight?" He goes, "Man, that was one of the finest examples of football I've seen in a long time. And out of you, I don't know what to say." And the young man says, Coach, I don't know if you know this or not, but after every single game or every single practice, no matter what, even if I sat on the bench and you didn't play me or I lost the game for us, no matter what, my dad would come find me. He'd give me a hug and tell me he loved me and how proud he was of me. And the coach said, man, you had a great dad. And he started to walk away. And the young man said, Coach, I don't know if you know this or not, but my dad was blind. And tonight's the first night he ever really got to see me play. And just like that, I got relief. Because I know that every time I walk into a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous and I say, my name is Jason Johnson, I'm an alcoholic, or I see a new person in my meeting I haven't seen before, and I go over and get him a big book, a cup of coffee, or I sit down beside him, I know that my grandma gets to see that. That might not be a big deal to you guys, but if you're an alcoholic who's traded everything away and you get that feeling, man, it's a great feeling. You know, I know that when I die and I go to that big meeting in the sky, that's the first place I'm going to go because I want to make sure there's a Bill, a Bob, and a Jesus, right? If there's not a Bill, Bob, and a Jesus, I'll let you people know if I get there before you. But I know who's going to be in the parking lot waiting to greet me. It'll be my grandparents, right? And I know what my grandpa's going to do. He's going to wave at me because he never thinks I know where I am going. And for the first time in my life, I'm going to be able to walk up to my grandpa because I've been hugging men in the meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous when it wasn't convenient or necessary. I'm going to be able to hug my grandpa for the very first time and tell him I love him and thank him for giving me a safe place to live. My grandma, on the other hand, she'll probably be dancing around praising Jesus and thanking God and telling my grandpa, I told you so. And I know what she's going to do. She's going to hug me. She's going to tell me she loved me. And she's going to tell me she's proud of me. And for the first time in my life, as an adult, I'm going to be able to look my grandma in the eye sober and say, Grandma, it's the damnedest thing. These people in this program called Alcoholics Anonymous, they found a solution to their problem and they introduced it to me. But most importantly, Grandma, some of those people showed me some grace. And in doing that, they introduced me to that little kid inside of here that only you believed existed. I owe everything to Alcoholics Anonymous. You did that for me. You people did that for me. You know, and I don't ever want to be able to have to pay. I don't want that debt ever to be paid back. I'll do whatever I can to make it right for somebody else. You know, I'll share one last story and I'll end. You know, about 6 months ago, or a little while ago, I had to go speak at a state convention in Indiana. I get to the state convention, and what it was is all 5 states in this Midwest states all meet together. It's all delegates, GSRs, past delegates. I don't know. It's all the AA work, right? And I'm like, good God, they got the wrong guy. I steal the meeting from me. I steal money from meetings. I cause fights at the business meeting. I argue about stuff I have no clue was. I don't know anything. I'm the last guy you need as a banquet speaker at a meeting like this. So I tell the guy who's hosting me, hey, I'll just pay for my own way home. I'll fly somebody here that'll do a talk for you. He goes, no, we want you. I said, man, I'm really not the guy. I'm not this kind of guy. He goes, no, we want you. And their slogan for that weekend was a seat for everyone. And I just thought, well, come Saturday night, that's going to bite them in the butt, but let's do it, right? So I stayed, man, and I had the best weekend of my life. Man, I got to I learned the politics of Alcoholics Anonymous. I got to hear some stories. Man, I was sold, right? I had just a kick. But that Saturday night when I had to do that talk at the banquet, I gave my talk, and at the end, they have these things called gratitude lines. Some meetings do, and I don't know why they call them gratitude lines, because every once in a while, somebody will walk up and they'll say, hey, my sponsor told me I have to thank you for an hour of my life I'll never get back. And then they run off. Or somebody comes and tells you, hey, you swore, you piece of crap. Or how could you sell drugs? I mean, sometimes you don't have a lot of fans, right? There's always those people out there that don't like you. I mean, a lot of people love you, but there's always a few. But I'm in this gratitude line, and I'm shaking hands, and I'm shaking hands. And I look down to see how long the line is, and I catch eyes contact with this lady, right? This little older lady. She's looking at me like kind of like she's pissed off, right? So I look down, I shake a couple hands, I look up, and she's looking at me again, man. I'm like, oh, that's her. She's pissed off, right? She's the one. I probably swore, I might have said something, you know, I talked about whatever I did. She's mad, right? I just know it. So I'm shaking hands, shaking hands. She should be here by now, right? And I should be getting yelled at. And I look up, and she's not where she's supposed to be. And I get a big relief, right? I'm like, yeah, she gave up. And I look, and she's at the back of the line staring at me. I'm just like, oh, Jesus, this is going to suck, man. So it gets down, it's just her and I, we're standing there. She's looking at me and I'm looking at her, and she's like almost crying. And she says, you know what? I said, what? She goes, I'm a grandma. Can I give you a hug? I was like, man, absolutely. That's way past anything I thought, right? So we hug and we start talking. I found out she has a 24-year-old granddaughter who's out there running and gunning and doing a lot of bad things with her body and doing a lot of bad things. And people are saying a lot of bad things about her. But she told me she's my grandma or my granddaughter, and I'm not going to give up on her. I love her no matter what. And we talked a little bit, and I found out she wasn't a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and she's not a member of Al-Anon. The only reason she was at that banquet that night is because a friend of hers who prays for her granddaughter every Sunday at church, her and her husband had banquet tickets, and her husband got sick, and she called her 10 minutes before the meeting and asked her if she would like to come hear a meeting of hope, a message of hope. And that was the only reason she was there. You know, we stood there and we talked, and I was kind of overwhelmed a little bit. And she starts to walk off, and she turns around. She says, hey, do you know why your grandma wrote all that stuff down in those books? I said, no. She goes, I know why she did. I go, why is that? She goes, because your grandma knew no matter all the bad things people were saying about you and the bad things you were doing, that one day you would be the one to come back and make that all right. And I just started welling up, man, because of gratitude. I wasn't crying because I was sad. I was crying because of the gratitude I have for the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I sat down and I was just sitting there kind of rubbing my face. And I look down and I see these boots, and there's these boots there. And I look up and there's this big guy standing there and he's just like crying. I'm like, holy crap. So I stand up. He looks at me and goes, I felt that. I go, what do you mean you felt that? He goes, I got goosebumps hearing what that lady just said to you. And I could hear this guy, Howard P., tell me once. He said, Jason, if you ever get goosebumps or you ever ask God for something, you get a tingling feeling, that's when God's rubbing your back and telling you you're welcome or you got it. Right. And I shared that with him, and he just looked at me in disbelief. Right. And we got to talk. And about 2 months later, 2 months ago, I was at this North Carolina State Convention, and there was the gratitude line. And at the end of the line, there's this big guy standing there, and he goes, you know who I am? I said, no, I don't. He goes, I'm Paul. I go, Paul? He goes, the guy you talk about in your story. I go, Jesus, you had a long beard. He goes, that was a COVID beard back then. My wife made me take it off. And I said, wow. And he goes, I had 60 days when I met you. And I had just got done doing a third step. And I knew there was a God, but I didn't know God knew who I was. Right. And I would get on my knees. My sponsor told me to act as if, and I get on my knees every morning. And I just say, God, I don't know if you know who I am, but I'm Paul. And I was hoping you could help me stay sober again today. And he said, I just kept saying that prayer and prayer and prayer. And the day I met you and you told me that God, when I felt those goosebumps, that was God rubbing my back and telling me he knew who I was and heard me, changed my life.